was gonna film a video for the anniversary of SpongeBob. It's been like 25th anniversary. I'm wearing the shirt. But I was so lazy today and I didn't want to film. But now randomly I got the urge to film. But I don't want to do the SpongeBob thing anymore, which, kind of sucks that I don't want to do it anymore, but whatever. So instead we're gonna be talking about anime. Now, I've been meaning to talk about anime for quite a while. I kind of got a head start with the Yuri on Ice thing because I wasn't going to talk about anime before until my big video, which is coming soon. Not today, but like tomorrow-ish or whatever. And there's like some animes I wanted to talk about. But the one thing I wanted to talk about was this anime movie that we never got. I don't know if it was supposed to be a movie or I don't think it would be a show, but a movie, yeah. So, Studio Ghibli, we all know Studio Ghibli. They're very famous for making some, good, movies. And apparently, Hayao Miyazaki wanted to make a movie about Pippi Longstocking. Now, there's been some pictures. I don't need to pull them up because it's like, obvious right now. And they're so iconic. I love them. She would have been so cute in an anime. I mean, granted, she does have cartoons, but like, it's not the same. I mean, it would have been cooler in an anime form. In Stockholm, Hayao Miyazaki had been awake since before dawn, watching the carpenters heading to their studios with their tin lunchboxes, and young mothers in the morning, strolling proudly with their babies. In Visby, he stared in mute amazement at the gingerbread houses and medieval stone walls, as if a fairy tale had come to life. Only allowed on the island for 3 hours, he pounded the pavements for a desperate 60 minutes before collapsing in a cafe and staring up at the scenery. He did not notice the swarm of mosquitoes until his legs and arms were thoroughly bitten. He amassed reams of sketches and logged every available moment in his memory. Many of these images are now preserved in the Japanese language book The Phantom Pippi Longstocking, an account of the anime that never was, and the shadow it would cast over the later works of the animators. I took photos too, but it's just important to observe. Just being there was so exciting to discover that Europe was completely different from what I expected. When you're pumped with adrenaline, the density of a day gets very high. All sorts of things come into perspective. Wherever you go, whatever you see, it's all very interesting. Miyazaki was in Sweden for the meeting that was supposed to change his life, a 1971 sit-down with Astrid Lindgren, the author of Pippi Longstocking. But despite the assurances of the studio middlemen, Lindgren had proved reluctant to set aside time to meet some anonymous Japanese cartoonists. Pleading exhaustion, she had avoided them for the entire trip. As the insects drained his blood at the seaside cafe, wow, this is very weird, Miyazaki began to suspect that he had made a terrible mistake. I had become a leading staff member, says Miyazaki, but it was clear to me that I had no future at Toei Animation. The company had decided that they would never let Aizo Takahata direct another film, and to be frank, that made sense. We made Little Norse Prince, which had been a box office disaster. I was already fighting with half of the workforce about their attitudes and their modes of expression. I still had a lot of friends, but even they were avoiding me in the hallways. An animator and a shop steward, Miyazaki was feeling the pressure from both the workforce and the managers, and was looking for an escape. One inadvertently arrived when his friend and mentor, Isao Takahata, I hope I'm pronouncing that right, I don't think I am, was offered a job at the smaller studio A Pro. Takahata, I keep pronouncing this wrong, I'm so sorry. Miyazaki and their fellow artist Yoichi Kotabe were lured away by their former colleague Yasu Osuka, who had left Toei 2 years earlier. This was a time when the big hits were all based on sports manga like Star of the Giants to Miyazaki, but Otsuka had somehow managed to make a go of the 2 seasons of the Moomins, which is a very nice show based on literature, and was now eyeing up the prospects of Pippi Longstocking, Astrid Lindgren's tale of the unapologetically free, super strong, red-haired sea captain's daughter who wanders the world righting wrongs with a monkey called Mr. Nilsson and a horse with no name. That was remarkable for us, says Miyazaki. We might have been able to make something meaningful, rather than just make something that was only television. The movements had opened the door of hope for us, so when I heard about Pippi, I thought there would be a chance. Isao Takahata regards Pippi Longstocking as a watershed work in European children's literature, fighting an establishment that had previously regarded children as bestial creatures that needed to be behaviorally trained into becoming adults. Very weird. Likening Astrid Lindgren to the similarly minded writers of Japan's child heart movement, Takahata describes Pippi as a bond that freed children's minds to be just as they were. It was, however, one child in particular whose influence would come to bear on Pippi, and that was the daughter of the CEO of Otsuka Pharmaceuticals, the sponsor of Star of the Giants, which in turn shrilled the corporation's Ornament C energy drink. Pippi became a viable project when the daughter and her mother both proclaimed their love of the stories, prompting Daikichiro Kusunobe at Tokyo Movie to actively seek acquiring the rights. Takahata was particularly charmed with the style of Osuka's work in the movements, noting that the characters were so strongly delineated that the tale was free to deviate from the originals. Seemingly unaware of the author Tove Jansson's horrified reaction to such liberties, he praised the first serial's emphasis on characterization, so that any event could be brought to the Movement Valley, and the story would automatically generate itself through the characters' varied reactions to it. Takahata was eager to try something similar with Pippi, integrating the original work into a chief director system where an overseer would be available to coordinate separate work groups. There was no chance of this happening. Lindgren had loathed the 1949 film adaptation so much that she had insisted on writing the scripts herself for the 1969 13-part Swedish TV show, shot in the picturesque town of Visby. It was the producers of this version who had unwisely offered to broker a deal between her and the Japanese for a cartoon version, and who singularly failed to lure Lindgren out of her study, but it was too late. The Japanese delegation was already in Europe, with the clock ticking on their return flight. Back in 1971, going abroad wasn't easy, Miyazaki remembers. There were no jumbo jets, and it took time and money flying via Anchorage. I remember Anchorage. I heard in a video once. What video was it? Bright Sun Films, now I remember. If I came back with nothing to show for it, people would say, "You went all the way to Sweden, and this is all you've got? You're good for nothing." Damn, Miyazaki, you need to have better confidence. So I had to get some results. Working on the assumption that Pippi was still going to happen, Miyazaki threw himself into designs, character studies, and observations. Forcing himself away from the everyday open sandwiches at his Stockholm hotel, he ordered almost everything on the menu, just to see how it was prepared. He poked around the Sandskin Open-Air Museum, observing the Spartan furnishings and the way that the staff baked bread in old-fashioned ovens. "Before I went there," he says, "I honestly thought that I could depict Europe without ever having to see it. But once I was there in person, I keenly felt the profundity of the real thing. I realized that although we were lumped in it all as Europe, everything changes depending on where you were. It was a location hunting that made me feel that way. It's when I found myself standing at the gateway to Europe." Refusing to believe that Pippi was not greenlit, Miyazaki continued his sketch of output back in Japan. He would take his eldest son, Goro. I want to do, I know I'm doing a side note, but Goro Miyazaki, I found a documentary video about that on YouTube, and I want to do like a live reaction to that because he's very interesting. Anyways, to nursery each morning and then barricade himself in the studio. While his colleague Yoichi Kotabe worked on the character designs, Miyazaki recreated every moment he could remember from his Swedish trip, and took himself on flights of fancy to create images for stories as yet untold. A postal plane stuck in a tree, a mysterious glowing reindeer, a crayfish poacher on loose. He also badgered his wife Akemi into resigning from her job to care for the younger child, Kizuki. Everything hinged on Pippi. But, of course, the anime never happened. There's no real evidence for Lindgren's reluctance at the Japanese end, apart from a cryptic comment from Tokyo Movie's Keshi Yamazaki, who thought that she had once said in a TV program that Japanese animation was too violent. Where on earth she got that idea from in 1971 is anyone's guess, because anime back then, it was still fresh, was still new, it wasn't violent. Not violent yet. Berserker and Akira, they were not out yet. Let's not talk about that, though. I like to imagine a Stockholm tea time coven of famous children's authors complaining about foreign cartoons, but Lindgren was adamant that there would never be no animation leaving the Japanese with a stack of research materials that they could never use. Or could they? This is where we talk about another film that Studio Ghibli made. I'm remembering now. So, in 1972, as relations normalized between Japan and the People's Republic of China, Tokyo Zoo received the gift of 2 pandas. The subsequent outbreak of panda mania coincided very neatly with the project Takahata had pitched to recycle some of the Pippi material. The new story would look like an episode of Pippi and the Pandas, in all but name, with a freckled red-haired girl of fearsomely independent means, somehow coming to live in a surreal style with a pair of talking pandas. Perhaps reflecting the childcare and work issues of that time in Miyazaki's life, much of the dialogue revolves around when fathers are supposed to be at work. Panda Go Panda 1972 was released in the Christmas holidays as part of an anthology package in Toho cinemas. I love Toho cinemas. As many anthology shows are obscure today, indeed, Panda Go Panda might itself have been forgotten were it not for its maker's later fame and had the abstinence of the second installment, Panda Go Panda Rainy Day Circus in 1973, would allow a home video released a generation later to be a feature length. Even though Panda Go Panda is set in Japan, admits Miyazaki, I used quite a few things in the house and the characters that would have been prepared for Pippi, but there were other elements of the unused materials that would crop up later in Miyazaki's work. A large swing strung from the tree would be repurposed as a part of his landmark work on Heidi, Girl of the Alps. Most iconically, his memories of Visby would be plundered to make the town of Kokiro in Kiki's Delivery Service. The sharp-eyed Miyazaki fan is also likely to detect foreshadowings of the forest god of Princess Mononoke in an eerie reindeer spirit, but there would never be a Pippi Longstocking anime. I quit Toei Animation to work on it, says Miyazaki, so of course I was really keen to make it, but at the same time, I did truly understand Lindgren's reluctance to see it turned into a cartoon. I do feel like that if we had been allowed to make it, she would have changed her mind, but you never know until you do it, do you? I just think it's super weird because there wouldn't be like a Pippi Longstocking cartoon until 1997. So like back in 1971, we would have gotten a Pippi Longstocking anime, and I guarantee you it would have looked good if the author just said, yeah, sure, why not? But we never got that, and you know what? That's sad.